Hi, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle, and today we're going to work on a reel that's called the WTC 200. It's a generic reel, I think, but based on looking at this logo here, it may be a Hurricane, even though it doesn't say Hurricane on the reel. And Hurricane is there's a couple of versions out there. There's Hurricane, there's Calypso, and South Bend. I think they're all in that same group. Based on some mergers and things. So if you have a South Bend ready to fish, the R2F, probably going to be the same reel as this, I'm thinking, or at least close to it. But what I wanted to work on today was a generic reel, because it doesn't matter what the reel is, it does need to be serviced. Regardless of whether it's a $30 reel or a $300 reel, you need to take care of it if you want it to take care of you. So we'll show you how to take this reel apart, how to service it, and how to keep it fishing. Because based on the quick test drive here, everything seems to be working fine, other than it's probably a little dry in time for the annual servicing. And I did say annual there. So pay attention to this, and let's see if we can't get this thing started. So I do notice, as some of the lower price reels, we have some dirt and a little bit of rust and things like that going on in there. That's because they'll use a steel shaft as opposed to a stainless steel shaft, and over time those things rust. Sometimes you'll see the side plate screws rust as well, but these look like Joe is taking care of them, and it's just going to be a tune-up. So we're going to start by removing the exterior pieces. As we do that, I want to thank all of the first responders, all of the essential personnel, all of the folks that are involved in trying to find a cure for this disease, and all of the folks that are involved in supply chains, as well as teachers and healthcare professionals, and everyone who's trying to keep us safe and keep us in some sense of normalcy as we work towards the solution here. Okay. I took off the spool, took off the tensioner knob, took off the spool shim, and I'm walking off the click ratchet at this point. And all of those are going into a parts tray. I use the bottom of a milk jug as a parts tray, and that just helps me keep track of where all the pieces and parts are. Sometimes you can get the side plate off. In this case, you can get the side plate off without taking the rotor off, but when I do my services, I like to service the entire reel, so I work with removing the rotor in addition to removing the side plate. If you're doing a quick service, if you're, let's say you're at mid-season, you want to just make sure that you have enough grease in that for continued operation of your reel, you can do a quick tune-up. You can just simply remove this and do some spreading the grease and the like, but when it comes in for an annual service, I like to make sure that we do it all. There was a rotor nut. It came in the traditional sense, and there's a lock washer, one of those split ring washers on top of this. So it's a good time to tell you, take pictures along the way if you are repairing or servicing your fishing reel. That way you're going to know how it goes back together if you get stuck. Speaking of stuck, I like to make sure that the bails are working fine. If they are, my simple solution here is just get some penetrating oil in there. I'm using a generic, an Ace hardware penetrating oil. You can use WD-40, Liquid Wrench, Master Blaster, any of those if you like. I just find that most of them kind of do the same thing, and the Ace hardware product works fine for me. There's a bar that goes up and down. That's the trip lever bar, so I do put a little bit of oil on there to make it move. And just as a note, servicing the bail, even if it doesn't have a roller bearing here, a drop of oil on there doesn't hurt. And the other note is, you do not need to remove the bail as part of your servicing. So unless it's broken, I recommend just leaving it alone and greasing the two slots where that bail meets so that it rides smoothly, and just put it off to the side. Okay, this has a traditional eccentric kind of a anti-reverse. It doesn't have a an instant anti-reverse. So as this is spinning, you'll notice it pulls it in, turning it, and as soon as you go to backpedal, that bar will push it out, and that bar will intersect with the teeth on the back of this rotor, or underneath the rotor. So we're going to service the bearing, so we want to take that off. Pay attention to the way that it is oriented and where that spring is. So the spring is up top, and it's line out looking like the number 6. That goes into my parts tray. Okay, so we can get the bearing out without disturbing this little arm. There's nothing going on with that arm other than that piece. And this is your override. So if you didn't want the anti-reverse, you would push that in, and that would hold it tight. And if you pull it back out, it allows it to come out to lock. There's three screws here. And I think what I'm going to do, I'm going to pull those out, but I'm not going to take the pinion gear out yet. I'm going to go down and open up that case, remove the shaft. That way we don't run into any issues when we go to remove that bearing and pinion gear. You'll notice I'm putting those screws onto my table, and the reason for that is I want to make sure that they're all the same size. I know it's a quick assumption to say that they're going to be the same size, but sometimes they aren't. So, okay, those 3 go in, and now let's take the 4 case screws out. These are also Phillips head screws. And people ask me about mechanical screwdrivers. Can they use the battery-powered screwdrivers? And I don't recommend it. One, first, I enjoy working with my hands. But secondly, if you, let's say you have some arthritis or some hand strength issues, I would say go ahead and use it, but have it on the lowest torque. And be very careful when you go to reinstall. Coming out, you're not going to do too much damage. But going back in, you can over-tighten those because of the torque in those. And I've seen cases come in bound, and I've also seen cases come in cracked. And I would suspect on a reel like this, replacement parts are not available. So I didn't find the schematic when I did a quick search, but then again, I don't know who the manufacturer is. I'm guessing it's Hurricane, but I'm not sure. So if anybody knows, then drop a note there, and we'll get some more information on that. I did the same thing with the case screws. I want to make sure they're all the same, and they are. And this is some kind of funky alloy, so it's not exactly a steel screw. It's something, which is okay. It probably would be a plated or something, and hopefully it helps stop rust. Now I'm going to remove that side case. As I mentioned, the side case comes out from underneath here. It's not part of the top here, so you don't have to worry too much. And it's a good thing that Joe sent this in because it's bone dry, right? There's a little bit of oil on there from the spray, but there's not much in here, and you certainly want to keep these things lubricated. All right, I'm backing down the crosswind block so I can get access to the screw. You'll notice we have a plastic bushing up top here. You want to remove this screw, put that into the parts tray, hold the crosswind block, and then you can pull up to remove the axle shaft. Once you remove that axle shaft, then you can remove the main gear. There's a plastic bushing behind there. You'll see that there's a little spring here in case you've taken this apart. You don't have to take everything apart. There's a little spring, and a hook on the little spring rides on this crest here. So if you somehow got this detached and were wondering where the springs go, there's a hook here, and then the spring rolls around under that arm, and then it comes back and it rests on top of that. Good thing to pay attention to. All right, now we can remove the pinion gear and the bearing. And it looks like I have to take that arm out because even though I could get the screws out, I couldn't get the bearing out. No harm, no foul. You want to remove that screw for the anti-reverse arm and the anti-reverse. Remember that there's a ridge here where the spring is going to load, that eccentric spring. So that's going to be the top side of this in case you got lost somehow. along the way. Put that in. Now we can pull the pinion gear and the bearing out. And as I mentioned, we're dry, so this was a good time for Joe to send these in. We're going to just make sure that we clean out the channels so that we get the old grease out of that. I'll do that on a paper towel so that I can get the old grease. Get the grease out and keep it out of the way of anything else that winds up on my table. Okay, that's good. Go ahead and put that bearing back on. Now I oil bearings, so I'm going to do that here. And I use a Realex, which is an aftermarket synthetic fishing reel oil. I like that basically for the applicator more than anything else, but it does a nice job of keeping our reels oiled. And I tend to oil bearings as opposed to greasing them. That's a matter of preference. You're not going to get much grease in a shielded bearing like this, so the oil will seep through. That's why I use that. Alright, so this part is done. I'm going to go ahead, right after I clean that one little spot, there's one little spot with some dried grease in it, so we'll get that out of there. And go ahead and put the bearing back in. I've got the 3 screws for that bearing next. Now, I know I took them out before I took the dog off in the sequence, but now that I have the dog off, I might as well just go ahead and put these in rather than try and work around it. And these 3, you're just going to grab the lip of the bearing, and because it grabs the lip of the bearing, it holds that bearing in so that it can't pull out. I recommend whenever you're servicing a reel on an annual basis, get up top here. Don't take the short way unless you're pressed for time, but it doesn't hurt to do exactly what we're doing here. Take the whole reel apart. It doesn't take that long, and you make sure as a result of that everything is functioning nicely. Alright, here's that screw, and the arm goes on the post here. This is where pictures help, because if you got confused along the way and you kind of lost track of where you were, then this looking at the picture will tell you how it goes. And I'm just having a little bit of a time here. Lining that up and making this go properly, so we'll get that done. Okay, and we'll back that off. It was just a little bit too tight talking about the tension on the other ones. Okay, that's this piece. You can go ahead and take that eccentric spring. We're going to load that back into that slot and test it. Make sure it's working well. It is. And we can go right back up and put that rotor back on because we're done with the top now. The lock washer. And I like to kind of work in segments on a reel, just because if you take everything apart, you're kind of really challenging yourself mentally in terms of where did it all go. But if you work in small bites, usually if you get stuck, you're just within a certain area. Give it a spin, make sure that it's doing what it should do, and it certainly is. We've got a plastic bushing in the back here. We can debate about whether you need to grease them or not. Plastic is self-lubricating. It's a petro product. You don't necessarily have to do that. You can. Then we have these two. This is your crosswind gear and your crosswind block. So the crosswind gear would be next. You want to get this on everything. Check the teeth. Make sure that they're all uniform and that there's no chips or cracks or bends. If you're missing a tooth, you're going to have an erratic performance in your fishing reel. Why do you miss a tooth? Well, a lot of times what happens is you get hung up. let's say a rock or a wreck or a tree or something, you get hung up. And you try to power through that by cranking the reel. And something's got to give, and a lot of times the give is the teeth. So if your reel has kind of got a skip in it, check those teeth. That's probably going to be the easiest way to make sure that you identify your problem quickly. All right, we have this older grease in here. This reel hasn't been used much, but what's happened is the grease has either evaporated or it's spun off the main shaft where it needs to be on the teeth and all, and it is just accumulated off to the side. So we'll put a little bit more blue grease in here. And I know I introduced Reel X. This is Penn Precision Reel Grease. And I don't care which brand of grease you use. What I do care is that you use a fishing reel grease. I just got a note in the comments that apparently Shimano cares about what greases you use, because it says if you don't use their product, the warranty is void. It's kind of odd, but not odd, but kind of selfish, I guess. I don't know. All right, check the teeth on the back too, because that's going to drive the crosswind gear. So you may have a skip, and you might swear it's coming from that crosswind gear. Remember that there's one back here that drives it, and that could be the issue as well. Okay, now we put the main gear in, then we can go back to our axle shaft. Wipe that down, make sure that it's nice and clean. If you had any issues with that, go ahead and use like a steel wool or something to keep some of the corrosion or pitting off of that if you notice that, but in this case this is fine. And we're going to go ahead and put that back in here. There's a flat side to that, that's going to face forward. Slides in nicely so we know that this reel is going to operate nicely, or at least it won't get stuck from the axle being bent. We're going to go ahead and put that tie down screw for the axle shaft in there. Now here's an important note in terms of reassembling the reel. Notice on this bushing that there's two ears. There's one on each side and they face out. There's two slots in this case, one on each side of the piece, and they align with this bushing. And unless you get those into the slot, your case is not going to snap in. So it's got to go like that. And then again, put a little bit of grease onto the shaft of the main gear. We can give this a spin at this point, just make sure everything's working fine. It is. Then let's take the case and cover it back up. So a service like this is only going to take about 20 minutes. I don't know what this video is going to run. Probably about that. It's going to take about 20 minutes. And if you want to keep a reel fishing all year and have it be dependable, that's all you need to do. You don't need to spend hours or think it's going to take hours to do. It really isn't. And what it's a matter of doing is cleaning out the case, making sure that the old grease, like what we took off of that main gear there, is removed, and that you replace the old grease and oils with new oil and grease, and that's going to keep your reel running nicely. You'd be surprised how little effort it takes to properly maintain a reel. Okay, just getting these back in. So if you like what you're seeing, I would ask you to subscribe to my channel. That helps my channel out tremendously. And if you do subscribe to the channel, I would ask that you hit that notifications button. That way you'll see the videos as I post them. I've been trying to post on a daily basis during the pandemic, trying to keep us all sane and give us a little bit of escapism, if you will. And if you don't want to miss any of these, then I would ask you to hit that notification button, and that'll ensure that as I post these, you get to see them. If you like a video like this, I would ask you to indicate that by liking it below. If you have a question on this reel or any particular reel, if you're trying to service something or maybe you have a problem with the like and just can't get by it, shoot me a note in the comment section. I do try to respond to all of them, and maybe I can help you out there. If I can, it would be my pleasure to do so. All right, the click ratchet goes on now. That's going to tell you when you're spooling in from the drag. You got this little click lever here inside the spool. That's going to brush up against the indentations on the teeth there, and that's going to cause the notification, if you will, when you back pedal. If you can hear that. Okay, I didn't want to tie down the spool yet because I want to service the drag washers in here. I'm always interested to see what's in these reels. There's three types of drag washers. There's a hard washer, there's a felt washer, and there's these, which are Teflon washers. So as I mentioned before, in terms of servicing them, there's nothing to absorb any kind of greases or that, so you don't need to service a plastic washer. You just simply need to make sure that it's clean. And it's I call them plastic. It may be a Teflon, I'm not sure. It's a petroleum product regardless of what it is. Okay, there's a round washer with a kind of a rectangular internal. That's called a keyed washer. That goes first. Second of your drag washers. Then you have an eared washer. Kind of looks like the ears on a face, right? Those go in the slot, and that's the middle washer. Then you have your last of the Teflon washers. Let's go clean off the dirt here. Here's a case where you would want to use some steel wool to get out of it. And that's more than dirt. I think that's a little bit of rust. But steel wool will help you get rid of most of that. Now this is a non-facing piece. It's not going to affect the drag operation because it's up top. It's where your button is going to ride against. But still, if you can clean it up, clean it up. You need to make sure that the one underneath is smooth because that's the one that's going to operate against the drag washer. Okay, and then there's a slot here. Inside the spool there's a slot. That's where this clip came from. So just kind of line that clip up. Get it lodged inside the slots. Now we can put it back on the reel. And we can tighten that down, and let's make sure we have drags. Let's make sure that the reel has been properly assembled and is working nicely. Give it a test drive, and then we're going to get it back to Joe. All right, there we go with that. Nice smooth reel. Nice functioning bail. There you go. That's the WTC 200. It's about a 50 size reel. It's an ideal reel for surf fishing, pier fishing, drop fishing off of a boat, ocean, inshore ocean, and externally it would be for the lakes, deep lakes if you like, as well. So that's it. I hope you've enjoyed that. If you did, again, please like it and subscribe. This is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Thank you for watching.